Okay, so my co-authors in here, Elis and Ian, we've been working a lot on tooth cementum in Mesozoic mammals, but they've indulged me in this little pet project of working with me, and Tom Rich has supplied a lot of the specimens. Whoops, there we go. So I'm really fascinated by these flat rock Cretaceous Aptian mammals from Victoria. And they're very, very hard to find. This is a project being driven very much by Tom Rich and Pat Vickers-Rich. The fossils themselves have been fluvially transported and then buried, stretched, cracked, ejected, back up to the surface again, and they're in a very, very hard matrix, in a sandstone matrix. It's very indurated. So basically, you can see the volunteers there. You find about one specimen a year of the mammals. They also find dinosaurs and crocodiles and so on. But of the mammals, it's about one a year, and you break into tiny little bits, and you look at them, and you hope you find some tiny bit of bone in there. So it's very arduous, and I'm very grateful for being allowed to work on these really interesting Aptian mammals from Australia. So there's three specimens, three taxa. Tenolophus, which is the one I first worked on, and there's a really, really gorgeous, on the left, I know the pointer doesn't show too well, on the left here is a reconstruction by Peter Trussler, and I worked on some of the scans for the part of the jaw there, and realised there was some rather nice preservation in there. So you've got this early monotreme, Tenolophus, from the Aptian, you can see the strange W-shaped teeth, and it's got this very elongate jaw. So that of itself, it's a really fascinating taxon. And then you've got two of these Istrabus sphenidae, bishops and Istrabus phenos. And I put bishops up there so you can see the size as well for someone holding those little specimens. So that all looks very nice with the reconstructions from Peter. But the actual specimens are really not always quite as complete, shall we say. So these are all the specimens to scale. Of the three taxa. Initially I asked Tom if I could have some to scan at the synchrotron, see what was inside them. And I had a couple, Bishop's Tenolophus, then he let me have another 7. So we've currently worked on 9 so far, so not a huge sample, I'm quite aware of this, but I didn't want any holotypes or anything too precious, and he's very kindly sent me these to work on. So that's what they look like. As I say, they've been a bit stretched and twisted and so on. They're all lower jaws. There's about 50 specimens in total that have been found so far. And we decided we would take them to the synchrotron because I wanted some very high resolution scans. We were at about 350 nanometers resolution. So we've taken them both to the Swiss synchrotron and to the French synchrotron. And essentially, we've been scanning a lot of other Mesozoic mammals, and we've sort of popped these in on the side, if you liked, sort of doing some extra ones. So I put up a picture of there's me there, sort of lining up Tenolophus. I wanted you to see the very high-tech coffee filter we use as well, just to make sure nothing falls off while we're doing that. So high-tech and low-tech at the same time. This is to make sure you're awake. This is a scan through a bishop. So just to show you the kind of resolution we're getting, the sort of preservation we're getting. You can see all the little black dots, the osteocytes there. There's a root in the middle there of bishops, the scale there for 200 microns. And you can see dentin tubules, you can see osteocytes, it's rather nice. You can also see some cracks and bits of infill and so on. So that's the kind of resolution we were getting, and it really is quite extraordinary, I think, when you think what these have been through. So Cementum is one of the things we're going to talk about. We've been very interested in doing this. So cementum is the tissue anchoring your teeth within the alveolus. There's a Morganucodon tooth there. There's a cartoon just to show you where cementum is. You've all got the cementum, and you've all got something akin to tree rings, if you like, on your cementum. And so they're annular rings. So every year you lay down a dark and a light band as they look in the scan, basically to do with how rapidly the cementum matrix has been laid down. It's well established it is an annular count. And the interesting thing is there's no resorption. So unlike when you get lines of arrested growth, perhaps in femur or humerus or whatever, you don't get any resorption of the inner younger rings, if you like. So what you see is what you get from when that tooth erupted, essentially. So you can get a lifespan out of that. And then the picture on the bottom right there is what the cementum lines actually look like around. There's dark and light bands. One dark, one light is 1 year. So we look for cementum in our Australian mammals. Small sample, that's the trouble. So there's one here of bishops, and I've labelled it up. You can see the specimen, and then you can see there's 2.5 years, essentially, so 2.5 of these dark and light bands. So that's a 2.5 year one. But there's hardly any crown wear on the teeth, which suggests it might have lived longer than that, in fact. We also found a 3-year one for the Astrabisphenios. It's not quite as clear on the cementum. The pointer works. Whoops, they're very close, these. Let's go back. I'll not dry the pointer. Anyway, round the edge of that tooth, there is some cementum there, and you can see 3 rings. And Elis has helped greatly in trying to make those clearer for me. So we've also got a bishop specimen with more advanced wear, because unfortunately not been able to find any more cementum, which is a shame. But we've got a specimen which has got a lot more wear. They're up there in the top right, and I've put the little one with hardly any wear up just to show you the difference. So that's suggesting they might have lived longer than the 2.5 years. This is a specimen. It's got some little pathology in the middle of the root, which looks painful. But it's also showing that although there was cementum on there, you can't count the rings, unfortunately. But there is potentially looking like there is some remodelling going on. So what you've got, you all very well know, if you've got something like a tennis player, they're using their, say, right arm, you get remodelling of the bone. You get micro-cracking because of the loading on the bone, and the bone remodels. And so you get the osteons, the sort of markers of what makes up the bone, are remodelling into secondary osteons. And so we were starting to see signs of this remodelling where you've got the bone is resorbed and then replaced, and there's this turnover going on. And so there's definitely some, if you look up above where the tooth is, nearer the tooth, there is some remodelling going on with these sort of rather circular looking bits of the bone, and whereas at the top, away from the tooth, there is just the primary osteons. There's not much going on there. So it looks like there's been some definite loading going on. But the interesting thing is that small mammals don't remodel, is you know, what we're told. Rarely, if ever, do they remodel. The strain on their bones is the same as for a big mammal, and it seems to be to do, with, according to Curry's very interesting paper, with lifespan. So if you're getting remodelling in little things, it's suggestive of a long lifespan. The micro-cracking is happening, but it just takes longer for it to happen. It's not just that you have a huge loading or anything. It's a sort of time thing. And that's suggestive, again, of a longer lifespan. We looked at Tenolophus, and we've got some very nice osteons at the top, not an awful lot of overlapping. But unfortunately no cementum rings. That was a shame, because Tenolophus, very interesting. So we tried another specimen and nothing there, all diagenesis. So I haven't got anything much from Tenolophus. So the question was, are there differences in the estimated lifespan of the extant mammals? So we've got a small sample size, but these things are tiny. They're little tiny shrew-sized things. So it's suggestive even now that 3 and 2.5 years is quite a long lifespan for these tiny little things. So let's look at this graph for a minute. So I'm throwing this up without all the background, but basically lifespan and body mass, there is a relationship. So you can be small, live fast, die young, or you can be larger, you live slower, and you live longer. So essentially we've got lifespan up here, it's a log graph, and body mass along the bottom here. And what we've got, the little crosses are the reptiles, and mammals are the black and yellow dots on there. So there's also an inverse relationship between metabolic rate and lifespan, and that's the interesting thing here. So I've put on bishops and Australopithecus, and you can see where they're lying within the mammals, that you've got the black dots, which are the bigger mammals, they live longer. And then down here, where you've got the smaller, shorter lifespans, you've got some yellow dots as well, and those are the heterothermic mammals, We seem to be sort of coming in there. But in fact, if they're living more than 2.5, 3 years, they're actually even lower metabolic rate. So it's suggestive that there is something heterothermic going on. On there, we've got a lot of other Mesozoic mammals, but I won't bore you with that right now. But the interesting thing is it's suggestive of probably a heterothermic lifestyle. So the second question is, remember that within the Aptian, this part of Australia, in Victoria, was in the Antarctic Circle. So how did they adapt to that? You had a very interesting talk yesterday, of course, about the Antarctic. So even if it wasn't that cold, you've still got a lot of dark, of course. And it seems from evidence that the temperatures probably averaging about 6 to 10 degrees possibly, but going down to 0 potentially, maybe some permafrost evidence, but certainly dark. So not too warm and certainly dark. And there's been some interesting papers looking at the hypsilophodonts, the little dinosaurs found as well, looking at their histology. And it seems that they did not hibernate, the suggestion from the lines of arrested growth. So they don't seem to be doing, they're a bit bigger, of course. They don't seem to have lived that long, but they were not of themselves hibernating. But what about the little mammals? So it's suggesting, or I'm suggesting, that we've got a heterothermic lifestyle here. These little mammals were living certainly more than 3 years old. What's that about? Torpor may be a plesiomorphic adaptation, hibernation possibly later. But if you're a little mammal, what are your options? You know, you can get big and fat and lots of hair and so on, burrow and that. But even then, it's dicey whether you can get through the winter. And it seems as if reproductive strategies is the thing. And so it increases your ability to survive, if you like, when you've got suboptimal conditions. So if you've got this slower lifespan, if you like, and you go to sleep in the winter, you don't reproduce as fast, you don't grow as fast, but you survive better because you get through the winter, these bad times, without predators getting at you or dying of starvation. And so Terbill did a very interesting study showing that it is actually, by hibernating, you are actually increasing your survival strategies. So that seems to be perhaps key. So in conclusions, these flat rock, at least the Astrabus phenicans, live to at least 3 years, based on Cementum, and because of tooth wear, which is only suggestive, of course, possibly longer. And interestingly, the remodelling of the mandible, which is generally not seen in any small mammals, is also very suggestive of a longer lifespan. So I'm suggesting heterothermy, probably hibernation, to get them through the winter. We've also got future work. As I say, this is a bit provisional. We've only done 11 specimens so far. I've got another 10 arrived to have a look at. Want to do some more specimens, especially Tenolophus. And also an interesting paper came out recently of Rachel Amira, was looking at enamel. She was sectioning various synapsids, non-mammals, mammals, and she was looking at growth rates from looking at the enamel. And so I said, what about doing this for flat rocks, and let's see if we can scan them as well. So we've provisionally scanned a couple we have to analyse yet, and potentially might be able to section if so. But that's really pushing the limits of the scanning. But let's see. Thank you for listening. As it's provisional, I really appreciate any comments and feedback. And these are all the people to thank. Thank you.